Well, hello, Mr. Stan Tatkin. I'm here. I'm honored to have you here with me, and I'm going to switch to gallery view so they can see both of us. And I'm excited about interviewing you. To my audience, the people that have seen me in social media, my email list, and all that. I've known you. You're a phenomenal couples therapist. You're passionate about what you do. I know that. I hear you speak. Heard you speak several times. I have your book, Love and War in Intimate Relationships, which is written for therapists, and I use that as a textbook in my human sexuality class at the School of Social Work at USC. And so you do a lot of things. I'll mention PACT a little later, the thing that you do that's behind your head there for therapists. But this is a talk for therapists, but of course also anybody at all who's watching, interested in having a better relationship, anyone who's interested in healing, because we know, as you talk about in your TED Talks, relationships are hard.
Yeah.
There's a TED Talk, which I'll mention once or twice more. It's great. But, you know, what makes relationships hard? Maybe we should start right there. Not that you do your whole TED Talk for us, but what makes...
Well,
is there anything I'm leaving out in terms of introducing wise relationships?
So one of the things I say, that there's nothing more difficult on the planet than another person. Mm-hmm. And it's really true. So there's several things that I'll say. They're pithy and they're funny, but I can also back them up with science and research. Nothing more difficult than another person. All people are a pain in the ass. All people are annoying. And there's no such thing as a low maintenance person up close, at least not for very long. So all relationships aren't difficult, but love relationships, or what we call the adult primary attachment relationship, is probably the hardest relationship there is. Mm-hmm. Harder than children, harder than pets, of course, and certainly much harder than plants. So, so that's a reason it's hard. And the adult attachment system, romantic system, is difficult because of its long memory going all the way back to early childhood. And so we're dealing with a memory system and a kind of familiarity recognition that is true with all couples that pair bond. That they become basically one degree of everybody else that ever helped them or hurt them in their lives.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's something that you see, that people will come and see me, couples, and they go, I don't know. I'm a wonderful human being with everybody. My bosses, even my kids, my friends, my aunts and uncles. My wife thinks I'm the worst person ever, or my husband thinks I'm the worst person ever. And sometimes I am. But it's got to be him, or it's got to be her, because I'm really wonderful with everybody else.
I know. It's so much of this is the human condition that people are not educated about. We don't learn early in school how to do relationship. Right. And we don't learn how to learn either. So, people are basically at sea when it comes to how do you do this thing? How do you really get along with another person that you're going to be with in the long run? Nature has a plan, certainly for short-term therapy, but it does not have a plan for long-term relationship. Does say short-term therapy, short-term relationships, but not with long-term relationships. No.
Yeah, I wrote a book called The Long Hot Marriage, and I always joke that it's not a fairy tale, that you really could have a long, hot marriage. But yes. It takes work. And in my very first chapter, I talk about that, we're just not very evolved yet when it comes to couples and how to make that work. And the good news is it's possible, but we haven't seen our parents. They're not good role models to show us how to stay connected through, as you say. I mean, there's a quote in your book, the Love and War in Intimate Relationships, where it's something like, our hope as therapists that our couples are able to stay connected through both. I don't know what that voice was, but it was like, did you hear that?
No, I didn't. But for a moment, I was having a hard time understanding your words. But go on.
I know something happened, but I think it's better now. But anyway, it was something like, that our hope as therapists is a couples can stay together through both heaven and hell.
Yes.
And to stay connected. In my book, which I wrote years ago now, I have a chapter called "Making Connection Stronger Than the Pain." And if we could stay connected, and I know this is some of what you say. A lot of what we talk about is very similar. We could pain doesn't separate us. Pain doesn't lead to divorce. Disconnection leads to divorce. And if we could stay connected through pain, of course, we love joy and we love heaven, but we have to stay connected. And yet, how many of us have seen our parents stay connected when I joke, and the mother says to the father, "I'm really angry at you." And the father says, "Really? Tell me more about it." I mean, how many of us have seen that scene? We haven't seen it. We've seen the defense and the activity.
True.
So, what are some of the things that my audience would love to hear from you in terms of what does an evolved relationship look like? I know you use the term an earned, secure relationship. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, I don't use earned secure. Earned secure comes from Mary Main's work and Eric Hesse's work in adult attachment. That's a research model. And earned secure, all that means in the nerd world is that the infant in the strange situation, which was developed by Mary Ainsworth, tested out as insecure, one side or the other, and then tested out with the adult attachment interview later on in life as secure. And so hence the term earned secure. But we talk about secure functioning, which is different than whether you are an insecure person or a secure person. Because when we get to attachment, we're dealing with a research model that looks at aggregates of people. It's not really about a person. It's only about one's sense of safety and security when depending on another person. So that's all attachment really is. But secure functioning is an expectation of behavior between two people in a primary dyad. So what that means is that in secure functioning, we expect two people to be operating in a two-person psychological system. That means that they are collaborative, cooperative, and they operate according to principles of fairness, justice, and sensitivity. They're truly mutual. They're like in a foxhole together. They have to have each other's backs. They have to be experts on each other. They have to protect each other in public and private. In other words, they are a survival unit, like cop car partners. They may not have chosen each other even, like cop car partners. They may not always love each other, even like each other, but they depend on each other for one important thing, and that is if they do not have each other's backs, they will get killed. So even cop car partners end up having a tighter relationship many times than their marriages. So secure functioning is not pie in the sky, unreasonable. It is achievable. It is simply understanding that you and I depend on each other to protect each other in this lifetime from one another and from the outside world and from things that are coming. So we're talking about a fidelity to a trust system, a system of pure devotion and trust, and a commitment to keep this milieu, this ecosystem of our relationship, absolutely safe and secure. We are stewards of that system. We take it very seriously because that is at the foundation of why we are together, at least from a psychobiological point of view, from my point of view. So secure functioning is an expectation of behavior, always assuming that we are animals, we're fickle, selfish, impulsive. We need these shared principles of governance in order to keep ourselves in line. Otherwise, it's the Wild West.
Right. I see what you're saying. And so how does a couple, what are some of the, what does it look like? I guess I'll ask this way. What does it look like? What does it sound like when couples are, like you say, having their back? They know you're there for me. We're there for each other, even in the tough times. What does that look like?
Well, there are a lot of examples out there. Some of them are on film, some of them are in literature, some of them are in your neighborhood, maybe some of them are in your family. But these people play well together. They're the real deal. They fight and they make up.
Okay.
They don't take too long to repair issues or to make amends, because that's a biological problem, a memory problem. People who take too long create long-term memory. That's unwise if it's a negative experience. They know each other better than they know themselves. So I would be like, for my wife, a Tracy whisperer. She's a Stan whisperer. She knows everything that I can possibly know about myself, and she knows how to lift me up when needed, how to protect me from something that is an age-old injury. I'm able to do the same for her, and this is all invisible to the outsider. This is something we just do. And when we move together, we only move together because it's good for both of us, not just one of us. This is something that we agreed on. And the reason people do this, by the way, is because they can. It's a decision. And if people really think about it, the alternative is not good. So what does it look like? It looks like, well, I wrote a Psychology Today article when the Obamas left the White House. Now, I don't know them. I can't possibly say that I know what their marriage is really like. Mm-hmm. But their presentation, by all accounts, at least, their presentation is secure functioning.
Yes.
The way they talk about each other, the way they deal with each other, the way they talk about their fights. And so, again, we don't really know. We're not in their bedroom, but they might be an example for those people who wonder what it looks like. Right. But there's many other people. They're not perfect. They're messy. They do stupid things like everybody else, mm-hmm. but they take seriously the safety and security system that provides them with the air they breathe and the water they drink. They get it.
It's well said. And I have to agree that the Obamas, when I think of them as a couple, that there's a certain, I get a certain feeling about them. It's a good feeling.
Yes.
Like I like seeing them together.
Yes.
I do. I just like it. So
two strong people, two very strong, autonomous people who interdepend.
Right. That's right. When I give talks to therapists, I talk a lot about developing the I and the we. And it's that sense that there's that I, that individuality, that strength, but there's also that we-ness. Yes. And you said something, I sometimes talk about there's an or relationship and there's an and relationship. The or relationship is either my opinion or your opinion. It's either my way or your way. Right. And an and relationship is my way and your way. Now, that's not always so easy, because I might think, I want to do the exact opposite thing. How do we stay connected even when both of us I think that my child should be treated this way, and you think our child should be treated a whole different way about this matter? And how do we deal with that without breaking us up? And how do and yeah. So that's
therein lies the rub. Therein lies the problem with basically the human software and hardware. For one thing, people should understand that the human brain actually starts off with something called a negativity bias. Mm-hmm. That means that all things being equal, which they rarely are, in the absence of anything that is positive, our brain tends to go negative. Now, why would it do that? For survival's sake, we have to be on the alert for anything that could hurt us or kill us, including our loved ones. So we tend to remember bad experiences more easily than good experiences, and we have many centers in the brain that are devoted to threat detection and threat avoidance. So that's one. Two, we are, in fact, basically selfish animals. And the natural state is, this is what I want, and if you don't like it, be gone with you. Or it's good for me, and if it's not good for you, sorry. Right. So that is the one-person psychological system that actually covers the majority of people. Those are called insecure cultures or insecure models. And those models generally come from somewhere. They come from adapting as a baby, as a child, to a family culture that is too unfair, too unjust, and too insensitive too much of the time. Mm-hmm. And we carry that forward into our relationships. So what are the chances that two separate people with two separate brains and two separate nervous systems in general are going to want the same thing at the same time? Well, except during infatuation, probably never. So we only approximate each other. So how do we then move? Well, if you think of relationship as a three-legged potato sack race, if we want to go anywhere, we have to move in tandem. Otherwise, if one of us goes down, we both go down. Right. So that's the folly of the I want this and it's my way or the highway. Right. In secure functioning, it requires a certain complexity in social emotional intelligence. That means that I already come to the table believing that it must be good for me and you. And if I can't sell you on it, if I can't bargain with you, if I can't persuade you, if I can't seduce you, then we go back to the drawing board. But we don't use fear, threat, or guilt because that accrues threat. It accrues unfairness. So how do I take care of myself and you at the same time? Mm-hmm. How do you take care of yourself and me at the same time? If people think this is impossible, then they're not thinking it through. It is entirely possible, and it has to happen because otherwise people, if we were to do that as a society, we wouldn't exist, right? Religion, laws, ethics are all about social contracts, all about keeping us from hurting and harming each other. Therefore, it's in my best interest to make sure that when I move, you are happy about it. Otherwise, I will pay for it. Right. You have to make sure if you're making a decision or you want something and I don't, and I'm showing some sign of, okay, you are going to have a problem. That's not good for you. It'll blow back on you. So we start with an idea that this is how it must be, and then the mechanics of it are such that people start to learn how to do this. But first and foremost, do you believe that it must be this way? If you don't, then there'll be a problem. Or if one person believes it should and the other person doesn't, that could be a deal breaker. Yeah. That all makes sense. And I love the plain English that you're speaking. It just makes sense. It's, what it comes down to, sometimes I use the term developing emotional muscle. We do need to develop emotional muscle because you're right. It's like this, we have these amygdalas, that part of the brain, that's the alarm system, and it's there to, like you said, help us survive. And so it's the whole idea of we first, America first, I first. It doesn't work. We have to, I'm trying to not be political here, but we have to be connected. I mean, connection and in the modern world, not in most, since caveman world, I guess, since agricultural societies came to be, the way I'm safe is when other people are safe. But right, that's right. Will go against that sometimes. And that part of the brain, but luckily, if only it were just the amygdala, it would be so swell. But the amygdala is simply, a very, very primitive part of the memory system that yells and screams a lot to other parts of the brain. Right. But everyone's development is different, and the brain is wired in a certain way that requires integration, just like people need to be integrated, and that there's fear and threat and paranoia, self-protection, and then there's also thinking about, is it wise to create enemies? Is it wise to act threatening? And is it wise to forget that our brain is built more for war than love? And this is something that I think is built into the, for better or worse, just the human condition.
Right.
Plenty of features and lots of bugs.
Right. Yeah, there's a certain amount of helping our clients have like a vision or a mission statement. They're not, a lot of the couples that I see, they're not thinking like this. They're not bad people. They just don't know how to think. That we need to think, it is in my best interest to not always think of my interest, to actually think of my interest and her interest or his interest. And we have to, I think one of my jobs is to help people think differently about that, so they're motivated to sacrifice, because there's a certain amount of sacrifice, certain amount of letting go of egocentricity and self-serving. And we, for lack of a better word, we have to sell them on this a lot of times. There's a benefit.
Yes, it has to be in the culture. And there's a bunch of us that have been striving to do that in a kind of a loose group that was a think tank started by Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt. And some of your audience may know some of these people, Sue Johnson and her husband, Tracy, and my wife and me, Ellen Bader and Pete Pearson, Dan Siegel and his wife, Carolyn. All these people, Marion Solomon and Matt Solomon, all these people have come to believe that the culture has been heading in the wrong direction for a kind of me-I-ism. And it's leading to certain systemic problems, and that we've lost the idea that we are actually that we are dependent animals. We are not as we think we are. We're herd animals that move in herds, but also pair bond within those herds. And so I think one is getting the idea of what this is, the relationships, how to operate in a relationship that's fair and just, secure, functioning. And then the other problem is understanding then how are you going to do that when there is a psychobiological problem here having to do with threat response. So you and I may have the greatest of intentions, but we start to trigger memories. I start to react to the look on your face. It reminds me of something, the sound of your voice, the dismissive move of your hand. And now I am starting to get aroused. And that means my heart rate is increasing, my blood pressure is increasing, and I'm beginning to lose some of the thinking function in the higher, fancier areas of my brain. Now that's important because as I start to move up, I do things, say things, my face does things to threaten you. And you start to move up also in arousal. Now we're getting towards a whole different system called fight or flight in the brain. And the chances of us being fully automatic, in other words, without thinking at all, is very, very high to almost certain. And therein lies the problem. It's not just that we have a greater idea of how to function, secure functioning way as a partner, but how to understand our physiology and understand how easy it is for us to get to feel. When I say threatened, I'm talking about small t threat. I'm talking about the kinds of things that happen day in and day out that are annoyances, but then also tap into fears going all the way back to childhood. And we don't understand that our brains that are almost fully automatic and based in memory. Our ideas about memory are completely off. Memory is not to be trusted. Perception is not to be trusted. Our communication, even on a good day, is terrible. Mostly misunderstanding each other much of the time. So we have a lot to learn in terms of the fallibility of our brain and the fallibility of interaction and how that gets us into trouble in our love relationships, but also in all relationships. So there's a lot here to learn. Yeah.
Yes. First, some of those names you've mentioned, I know all of them and have followed all of them. And it's great how you mentioned the spouses. Some are therapists, but not all, I would imagine. But they're not all therapists, the spouses, right? That you mentioned.
No, not all of them, but they're all. I would count them as all secure functioning. I mean,
Secure functioning couples.
All, yeah. And Matt and Marion are one of our mentor couples, Tracy and I. So no, they walk the talk.
You got to walk the talk.
Yes.
You got to practice what you preach. And walk the talk doesn't mean perfection, like you say. You focus on repair. The repair. We're going to our brains, like you say, are very fallible, and they slip into protection mode, survival mode, and we could slip. Sometimes my wife would say to me, what you said to me just now, I mean, is that what you would tell your couples to do? I go, oh, sorry, we got to repair it. Like you say, speed, speed is important. Repairing it quickly is better than repairing it slowly. Repairing it slowly is better than not repairing it at all, I guess. But right. The quicker, the better. The quicker, the better. The longer, the more threatening the relationship, and the sooner you'll die. Because the interpersonal stress in a love relationship is intense. If it's not kept at a certain level. And so we know this now from studies that the one thing, this is according to the Grant study, the longest running study in history, the one thing that leads to happiness and longevity is at least one secure relationship or secure functioning relationship. At least one. However, if you don't have that, if you don't have relationships that are secure, then you're likely to die early and to be more sickly and be unhappy. But if you're in a insecure relationship, love relationship, where there's a lot of acrimony and threat, you're still going to die early. So it has to be as you and I are talking about it. Yeah, it has to be this quality. Let me ask you this too. This is another thing you talk about, you write about, and I see it all the time. And we've talked attachment theory, which basically for our audience it's realizing that we're in this world. Our security depends on attaching to our mommies and daddies and caretakers, and that's very important. That's the most important thing there is. Part of attachment is also being able to individuate or separate, and to still be attached as we separate. And if we grow up in a home where our parents allow us to individuate and still love us and connect, and we feel safe in exploring, there's a good chance we'll develop into healthy, like you said, interdependent human beings that aren't overly dependent or overly independent. But people don't always grow up in these kinds of families. So what we end up seeing is different kind of couples when they come from insecure families. Sometimes one partner is going to be the kind that is constantly needing to be soothed. Soothe me, soothe me, soothe me. And then if you do one thing that stirs up my anxiety, I get very hyper aroused. And then you have maybe the other person who has what we call that avoidant style attachment, where they grew up in families where you're just not vulnerable. It's not rewarding. You deal with your pain inside of you. These are the people that come into our offices who've been through a tremendous crisis, and you go, how you doing? I'm fine. And they're always straight lining it on the outside. So you can have couples where both people are hyper aroused and they escalate real fast. You have the couple that is both hypo aroused and there's no energy. And you talk about this one couple in the book. I love this in the book that I have, The Love and War, the sexless couple. I can't remember their names offhand, but the way I'm going to want you to talk about that. That's what I'm thinking. And then you have what you call the biphasic couple, where one person's hyper aroused, the other person is hypo aroused. They're like, you get that a lot, probably more than any of the others, but you get those are not as common. Yeah, there's all these combinations. It's true. So as a therapist, we have to deal with these people differently, do different things, because we have someone who's hyper aroused. We have to help them settle down. Someone's hypo aroused. We have to help raise them up and connect. And so, just talk a little bit about that in your psychobiological approach. Okay, so psychobiology means studying the brain and the body. So there's the psychological element, which all of it actually is developmental. When we look
psychobiologically, we're looking at prenatal development, postnatal development, and particularly critical periods of development from about birth to 18 months, and with attachment about birth to 24 months, critical period. So you actually talked about a lot of separate things. These are not the same. So attachment, think of attachment as early set points that are modified throughout life as to how we feel safe and secure upon the person we depend on, and break that down to how we move physically toward and away from that person, and how long we can stay in contact before having to break off where it's too much. So we have proximity seeking and contact maintenance, right? And attachment is about really a signal response system. I signal and then you respond. Depending on how old I am, how long it takes for you to respond causes me distress or soothes me. If you respond inappropriately to what I'm signaling for, that's distressing. And if I have to pay for having signaled in the first place because I'm bothering you, all of these become the calculus by which I signal again and again. So these are repetitions that get burned in rather early. And even when we become more secure in life, if we're under sufficient stress, we'll revert to the earliest experience, right? So that's why I'm saying, and temporarily, but that's why I'm saying that this is all about memory. The earlier these experiences, the more repetition or repetitive they are, the more they have an emotional or somatic weight to them, intensity, the more likely they're part of something that we revert to in order to take care of ourselves. That's all we're talking about. So distancing folks have adapted to an environment where their strategy is to protect themselves by being independent and not being a pain, not being needy, and being a little bit conflict avoidant, if not a lot, and so on. On the other side of the clinging side, a child had to adapt to take care of at least one parent's emotional state and was rewarded for clinging and staying young. So all of these things have to do with memory. Now, fast forward later on in life, these ideas get modified with every relationship we have, or they get reinforced. But it is fluid. Attachment is fluid. The other thing you said about high arousal people and low arousal people, that tends to be more of a biological set point that stays pretty constant through life. That seems to be familial. We don't really know how much of it's genetic, but it is people who are hyper aroused tend to be more manic-like, more experimental, more vital in a lot of ways, but they also tend to be angrier, more explosive, more impulsive, and so on. So that is separate. We're talking about separate planes here that interact. And then there is the combination of people. One person becomes more distancing or is more distancing. The other person appears to be more clinging. They are more likely alike. One looks a certain way because they're acting in dynamic reaction to the other person. The only way we can determine whether someone is absolutely from that clinging group is if they've been that way throughout life. Otherwise, we're dealing with a system that is too hard to pinpoint, but they're reacting to each other.
Right.
The arousal system within the relationship has to do with co-management of each other's nervous systems. Mm-hmm. So you and I get together, we are a co-regulatory team, which means that we're either really good at putting fires out quickly, or we're terrible, or we're sort of good. We're either really good at creating excitement together, or we suck at it, right? Right. That is a combination problem of, how good are we at managing each other's states. That's a skill set. It's also a developmental capacity, but it's also something that has a mystery to it in the combination of our two nervous systems. Mm-hmm. So we want to be clear here that we're dealing with a very complex thing, the human mind, which like outer space, we kind of understand, but we still not enough.
No. No, it's an art too. What we're doing. There's science to it, but there's art to it. And sometimes I look at that when I'm working with a couple, that we're trying to create a masterpiece, and you have to dance in the moment sometimes. And it's an interesting vocation we have, you and I. But
I wouldn't want anything else.
Same with me. I love it. So what might you have, let's say, just to use this last example, you have the one person who's hyper aroused tends to be in that state, angry, the hypo aroused partner, and they're having, like you said, I think you said, trouble in oftentimes managing and co-managing that. What are steps they could take, of course, with or without a therapist? But I mean, what can they do? How do they go from this frustrated pair? Because the person who's hypo aroused is.
Are you talking about a set point where this person's always like that, or is a state?
Okay. In relationship to each other. So okay. I mean, what I'm trying to understand what you're saying is, you're saying it's a set point. So a person.
Are you talking about a trait or a state?
I'm talking about a state.
Okay, that's good. That's important because that's very different. Okay.
Yeah. I'm talking about state. Yeah, I'm talking about.
So in this moment, you're hyper aroused. I'm hypo aroused.
Right. Hypo. Yes.
In this moment.
Okay. But don't you find, Stan, that that is a moment that's repeated oftentimes in patterns many times with couples?
Yes, but we have to dig deeper. We have an idea here, but we don't know what it means. And so everything, I always tell my students, this is all about investigating. It's all about finding out details. The devil's in the details. Sure. What does this mean? If you go granular, how far can you go to get to the bottom of this in real terms that is satisfying and that leads you to something to do about it, leads you to an intervention, right? Otherwise, if you just take it on the top level, it could be a million things.
Right.
So let's say when we get into conflict, I drop. I don't drop to the point where I collapse, but I get very slow. I appear overly calm, and you start to get more hyper aroused, and you start to feel like you're spinning upward. In systems such as couples or any system, where there's one, there's the other. No angels, no devils. And so we always look to see if there's something as opposite as this. Is this a chronic situation or is it a defense? Oftentimes people coming from families who got very hyper aroused start to slow and start to calm themselves in a way to protect themselves. This, unfortunately, threatens the other person who sees them as unresponsive and dismissive, and they start to get more excited, which then threatens the other partner and gets them to actually be too chill. And now they're off to the races, right? So that's one scenario and a very common one. Think of a Mickey Mouse balloon. When you squeeze one ear, the other ear gets larger. You squeeze the other ear, right? And that's what couples do. One partner does all the anger, and the other partner is afraid of anger. This is the sort of the homeostasis issue of couples. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is that one of these people has a hard time with acceleration, has a hard time with calming themselves down, has a hard time with self-regulation, and that's a whole other matter, right? But oftentimes it's a matter of that they don't understand that they're in each other's care, not their own. When you and I are at this distance, although it's virtual, and we can see each other's pupils, it is more efficient for me to regulate you and you to regulate me than for us to do our own selves. Mm-hmm. So I have to learn how to regulate you. You have to learn how to regulate me. And there again goes to an idea that most people don't have in their heads. Right. You should take care of yourself. I should take care of myself. You're having problems, go out and see a therapist. But I should not have to do that. Right. And yet we know that that our brains are actually built at this distance for co-regulation, mutual regulation, interactive regulation, because at this distance, I can actually see what's going on in you before you know it, and you can see what's going on in me before I know it. That's the beauty of this system, right? So again, it's a failure to understand. I think people aren't educated in this, and they don't get any help on how to do it. And they didn't, like you, to your point, they didn't see it in their family.
They didn't see it. They never saw it. And so, like you're saying, I mean, you've said so many great things, but the one thing that I want everyone to take away from it's like, we have to realize we have a job in intimate relationships, and it's my job to regulate my partner. And if what I'm saying or doing is somehow dysregulating my partner, I have to say and do something else. And I got to find out what that is. And if both people are willing to be curious, I love the word curious, you know, and
curious, not furious, is a colleague of mine.
And experiment, that's another one of my favorite words, with new ways that may feel a little bit weird at first, we might actually get somewhere.
Yes.
But Stan, it's been great. I want to just mention a few things about you that I want people to do, and then when I stop the recording, don't go away, we'll talk. But I just for a minute. But you are doing, now there are people in my audience, many therapists are in my audience, and there's many that are not therapists. But for those therapists, you have behind your head, it says PACT.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about PACT?
PACT stands for a psychobiological approach to couple therapy, and we train the institute that we have. We train therapists all through the United States and outside of the United States as well. So we have a training arm. That's actually how this started. But we have since begun to take this direct to market, and we do couples retreats also within the United States and abroad. That's all on the website, thepactinstitute.com.
Is it called The Pact Institute?
Thepactinstitute.com. And there's a link to it from stantatkin.com. I mean, it's all over the internet, so people should be able to find it.
And Stan Tatkin, it's STANTATKIN.
That's correct. Yeah.
So that's good. And then also, everybody go see his TED Talk. Just put in, I guess, TED Talk Stan Tatkin.
Tatkin TED.
Tatkin TED. That'll work.
In Google, yeah.
And it's excellent. It's really great. As a matter of fact, when I was thinking about who do I want to interview next, and I was thinking about you and the author of this book, and then I saw your TED Talk. I go, I'm calling him. So I love that. So there are a lot of other books that people can get that are on the market sure. that are much more friendly to couples. Yeah. Than Love and War, but Love and War is written for the therapist, right? Yeah, so right. If you're a therapist, get it.
Your Brain on Love and Wired for Love are the two popular ones.
That's great. That is great. Well, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, good sir.
All righty.
Take care.